Hey everyone, just wanted to take a pause in the episode here to let you know that our book chronicling the entire history of the Steelers-Ravens rivalry is now 35% off for the holidays. Think about the Steelers fans in your life who you need to buy a Christmas present for, maybe your dad, your brother, son or daughter, or even a friend. This would be a great way to give them a nice gift without breaking the bank. This book will be at a discount for a limited time only, so tap the link in the show description to order your copy today, and thank you so much for supporting our show. Hi everybody, welcome to the Pittsburgh Sports Memories podcast. I'm Tim Hannon.
And I'm Steve Word.
And as always, we're going to take a look back at some event in Pittsburgh sports history and deep dive into it.
All right, today we're going to go into the 2004 Pitt football season. It was a rather controversial one, and it definitely had a lot of twists and turns and very eventful for the Pitt football program in general. So to begin, to give you a little background on what was going on that time in Pitt football, in 2003, we're still in the midst of the Big East. It's teams are leaving, like Miami and Virginia Tech, and BC is Boston College is on its way out at the end of the season. They played a couple of lame duck years in the Big East there before moving on to the ACC, but Miami and Virginia Tech had already left that year. So basically at that, it's the teams that are leaving versus the teams that are staying, which will be Boston College. At the end of the 2003 season, Pitt loses in embarrassing fashion to Miami in what they call the Big East Championship game. That loss cost Larry Fitzgerald a Heisman, a shot at the Heisman. Well, it was a Jason White from Oklahoma won, even though he was playing nobody, and Larry Fitzgerald was playing against Sound Taylor and Antrell Roll, so that was probably the competition was a little bit more stiff for Larry Fitzgerald than Jason White. Also, what happened was a longtime athletic director, Steve Peterson, the person that had brought Pitt football, especially back from the brink of probably going away. He brought them back to at least respectability. He had left the season before, and he was the person that had hired Walt Harris, so he had a vested interest in keeping Walt Harris there since he was his coach. So after that, I think they still had an 8-win season that year. For some reason, the expectations were raised, and this increased pressure on Walt Harris for the 2004 season. Unfortunately for Walt Harris, his quarterback, Rod Rutherford, had graduated. He had been a solid starter for years for Pitt, and Larry Fitzgerald, seeing that Rod Rutherford, his quarterback, was leaving, and that they were going to have to break in a new quarterback, either Palco or some guy named Joe Flacco, decided that he was going to go to the NFL, which was a little controversial because he only been in school 2 years, but the rule at the time, I think it's still the rule, is 3 years out of high school. So he kind of got an exception because he was 3 years out of high school, even though he had only played 2 years of college. So Larry Fitzgerald leaves, Rod Rutherford leaves, and as usual, the media who had voted against Larry Fitzgerald and sabotaged his Heisman career for no apparent reason. Bob Smizik wrote this in the paper regarding Pitt's upcoming season in 2004. It's with an eye toward that record and Harris's failure to win the important games and get the Panthers to a major bowl appearances that raises the subject of job security. And that was Bob Smizik from the season preview. So, I mean, that's a lot of times it happens in the city. For some reason, I don't know why the media feels need to, take shots at Pitt. They don't tend to do that with Penn State or West Virginia, I don't think. And not sure why there's more of a contentious relationship in the media towards the university, but that's how it is.
So yeah, and to be fair, I guess if we're gonna try to look at it from that perspective, that 03 season was a disappointment. Like, they were the number 8 team in the country at one point in that season. They lost to Toledo.
In Toledo, yeah, it was
in
pretty
Toledo.
bad loss.
They lost a home game to Notre Dame, and then even after all of that, it was a very up and down season, but they still had a chance to win the conference at home against Miami. And like you said, they just got destroyed in that game. And they ended up playing, I forget the bowl game they played in, but it was against Virginia.
Yeah, and Heath Miller.
Miller torched them for that whole game. It was just, that season was supposed to be the culmination of, Walt Harris had been just slowly building the program. And then in Larry Fitzgerald, he had arguably the most talented player in the history of the program, and probably next to Tony Dorsett.
Or Marino, yeah.
Or Marino.
And probably one of the more talented players in the country, too, outside of Sean Taylor at Miami.
Well, he should have won the Heisman, absolutely. But
they voted, Smizik and Cook voted against him.
Yeah.
How can you win the Heisman when your own media people won't even support you? And I don't understand that.
I think the Heisman, you're not going to give it to Oklahoma had, was playing for their conference championship, and they were one of the best teams. I don't think they were ever going to give the Heisman to a mediocre team. I think if Pitt goes out and beats Miami, wins the conference, gets into a BCS bowl, even if Fitzgerald would have had a so-so game, I think he gets the Heisman. Mm-hmm. You also almost never give that award to receivers. I mean, I think Tim Brown was the only other guy that won the Heisman.
It's a quarterback.
It's a quarterback. Tim Brown and Charles Woodson. Those are the only two guys I can remember that
weren't quarterbacks or running backs.
Exactly. But I think, well, is it fair to question that Walt Harris' job was in danger? I don't know, but I do know that in 2003 they fell way short of the expectations that they should have had.
Well, and that kind of set up the 2004 putting pressure on him, and I also that kind of turned me on. I think Mario Lemieux once said, the only award he ever cared about was the scoring, whatever the Hart, is that the Hart they give away for scoring the goal? The Art Ross.
Because nobody votes on it.
Right. And I'm with him. That's why I don't care. MVP Lamar Jackson, who cares? Good. Congratulations.
It's all subjective.
Here you go, Miss America. Answer a question. At least the Vezina in hockey, they just go stats anymore. It's who has the best save percentage? But be that as it may, the Heisman Trophy did not go to Larry Fitzgerald. So on to 2004, and so coming into that season now they have Tyler Palko. He had redshirted that year. He became the starter in 2004, but he's not a proven starter yet. But he is highly regarded recruit, and mainly his father, Bob, is a high school coach at West Allegheny. So he's a local kid, highly recruited, and that, in college football especially, that has a lot of sway because you always want to try and keep, the local talent in-house and local. You don't want them leaving.
Especially when you're Pitt.
Yeah, well, any team. I mean, if Rutgers could keep all the talent in New Jersey, they would probably have won 3 national championships. You just look at the people that come out of New Jersey, and even Pitt's done well in New Jersey. I mean, there's a lot of high school football talent that comes out of New Jersey. Which brings us to the next person, Joe Flacco, who is the backup quarterback and is from New Jersey. Once again, if Rutgers could have somehow made him stay, they probably would have had a better team. But his dad isn't a local coach. He's not highly recruited. But he did redshirt in 2003 and is facing another year as a backup. I do remember him playing in a spring game that year, and he looked like he weighed 120 pounds, but he could throw a ball through a brick wall. He had a really strong arm, and he wasn't afraid. I remember he wasn't afraid to put his head down and try and run people over, even though he more bounced off them. But I didn't know. Didn't think Joe Flacco would be a first-round draft pick. No, but he did look like he had some potential there. And I also remember before that season that Walt Harris was talking about one of their opponents, how they had won 8 games the year before, and their coach had gotten fired that same year, and Walt couldn't understand how that happened to a successful coach. So kind of a little foreshadowing there himself there, Walt Harris. So we're going to begin the season. The first game they play against a MAC opponent, Ohio University, and this is back well, I guess they weren't. They lost to Toledo, but I think that was the first time. Was that the first time they had lost to a MAC team? The year before, yeah, because they had never lost to a MAC team. So for most of the time, Pitt had beaten MAC teams pretty easily, and that was kind of the way that went. So it really wasn't much of a game. It's just kind of one of those tune-ups. They won 24-3. So the next week is the big test. It's Nebraska comes to town. They're a solid opponent, and it's the first test of the season. Tyler Palko threw 2 interceptions early in the game, but they did bounce back, and they played a lot better in the second half, and they did come up just short. Pitt lost 17-24, but Palko had a much better showing in the second half. I think that Flacco did get in for a series, but I don't think they let him throw a pass. So, I mean, Flacco kind of got in, but didn't really do anything.
Well, the reason Flacco – so I was at that game. It was a weird weekend because it was that Friday was for folks that live in Pittsburgh might remember this. Hurricane Ivan had happened, and there was all this flash flooding that took place in Pittsburgh. There were parts of the city underwater.
I remember that, yeah.
That were
like
never
the front steps
before.
of Heinz Field, like they couldn't bring the boat. Like they used to bring the boat over.
They talked about canceling that game because of all the floods, and they decided to play it because it was it was on ESPN. ESPN, I think guys like the college football guys were there and everything. It was a big deal. And like you said, Palko really was bad, and everybody was just booing Palko when he'd walk off the field, and so Harris put Flacco in, and I think he did let him. I think it was mostly handoffs. I think he did run a passing play, but like he didn't throw the ball. I think he scrambled and ran out of bounds or something like that, or maybe even got sacked. I don't remember, but it was very short-lived. And like you said, when they brought Palko back in, then that kind of woke him up. And then I don't think we saw Flacco the rest of the season.
No, because I remember Harris said that too after the game, that he thought sometimes with a younger player, sitting them down helps them just, especially after they've been struggling, just to see the game for the sideline. It kind of slowed the game down. And it kind of like the comeback thing, like that's like another like thing that happens in this season is that's kind of like the theme of this season for this team. And it's why it's one of my favorites. I love this team. And they just, no matter what happened, they were always game. They just always, and you got to see this through the season. They're always behind the 8 ball. Always seem to have like everything going against them. But for the most part, they fought through, and they had a fair amount of success. So the next week, and I remember going to this game. I was at the Nebraska game also, but I was at this game, and this was kind of a low point ever at Pitt for me because so Division I AA powerhouse Furman comes, which Furman is the only non-state school to win a FCS title. There's your fun factoid about Furman. They're just a private school from South Carolina, and they've had a lot of success at that level, but they're not at Pitt's level. So Pitt they're down 17 points in the second half, and the worst part was in the first quarter, both of Furman's safeties got hurt. So, not only could Pitt not score, they couldn't score on backups on a FCS. They're backups now. You can't even say they're starters. And the quarterback for Furman was this guy named Engel Martin, who played at Florida, and he got Urban Meyer chased him out of there who was the other. They won a national championship. It wasn't Tebow, the guy before Tebow, but yeah, that guy. But and he played well. But to Pitt's credit, once again, this team, they put it together because I really thought they were going to lose to Division I AA team. I really did. But they put it together, and in the second half, they were able to tie the game and send it to overtime. And this is back when nobody could kick a field goal in Heinz Field, so the goofball coach for Furman decides he's going to try an overtime. They don't get any yards. He's going to try a 30-yard field goal with his Division I AA kicker in the open end of Heinz Field. Well, I wonder if he's going to miss it. So the guy misses the field goal. It really wasn't his fault. I mean, it's probably an impossible task. But Josh Cummings, who hits a big field goal later, and they win the game, and they avoid the season being a total disaster. A loss to Nebraska isn't the end of the world. This would have probably killed their season for sure.
It certainly would have. It certainly would have been a huge, massive step backwards to lose to a Division I AA team.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, just going back to that Nebraska game for 1 second. The fun fact about that weekend so Joe Flacco gets into the game, but then never gets into the game again, and that sort of sets a little bit of a path forward for him. I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
The next day, so that's happening in Pittsburgh. The next day in Baltimore is when Tommy Maddox got hurt and Ben came in.
Yeah.
And Ben became the starter ever since. So it's just funny. Pittsburgh, Baltimore,
Yeah.
a lot of things happening that weekend that sort of set the future of both of those franchises in motion were happening in
At
different
the same, yeah.
places. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the next game was Pitt went to UConn, to wherever UConn plays their football games. Stores.
Probably in Connecticut.
Well, in Connecticut, but I don't know if it's Stores or not. Wherever Rensselaer Field is. But on another school that had just moved up from Division I mean, they weren't really an established football power. They had Dan Orlowski was their quarterback. So, and some guy named Cornell Brockington was their running back. And what kind of sealed this is probably the first big problem Walt Harris made for himself. This is the first little shovelful of dirt Harris put in his own grave here on top of himself. Was late in the half, and I think they were down, and instead of being aggressive and throwing a pass in the end zone, and Cummings had been a good kicker, he calls for Tyler Palco to run to the middle of the field and slide to set up a field goal on a makeable third down. And that really got him a lot of criticism. And then in the second half, they couldn't really stop the running game of UConn, and that Pitt fell 29-17. And
that was, I can tell you for me, and I'd been a Walt Harris fan for years, because he really, like you said, the program was just absolute garbage before he came. That one was tough because you just thought, this is Pitt's, this is the ceiling for Walt Harris. If he can't go for a touchdown here, it was 3rd and goal, and he just sets up a field goal with they don't even try.
No, and it wasn't it was 3rd and 23. I think it was 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 12. It was 3rd and
goal. I don't remember what yard line it was.
But it wasn't super impossible.
It wasn't impossible,
yeah.
and you could throw, even if you threw a short pass, or heck, even if you handed off up the middle, and it was a kind of a fake or conservative play. But he literally didn't even try. He just had Palco slide and give up, and it just for me, I don't know if this guy's ever going to get past where he is. It was definitely a tough moment.
And I mean, I get, even if they scored there, it would have been 4 more points. So 29-21.
Sure, but it was just
stopping
the principle.
The unstoppable, Dan Orlowski. Give him the Heisman now.
Yeah, they had bigger problems than that. But again, it's when you're being overmatched and you're losing and you don't even try. It just, I don't know. It says a lot about who you are as a coach.
Yeah, so after that first little faux pas, he kind of the media is really on him, and Smizik, is already criticizing before the season has even started, and all the fans are on him. And this is still in the days before the internet, so I can't imagine what it would have been like now. I mean, there wasn't Facebook or web pages and stuff, not like there is, and so. Walt Harris, in all his wisdom, decides through his agent he criticizes the university in the paper, in the Post-Gazette, and the quote was, "Pitt is not a major power. It is not one of the 20 jobs in the country." And to me, that's the point when the whole season kind of pivoted at least for Walt Harris, and he wasn't going to be the coach of Pitt anymore probably after that, because you can't keep a person that's I think the athletic director was Jeff Long, so Jeff Long had no loyalty to keep Steve Peterson. So to keep Walt Harris, and he did it to himself. He really did. And you say, well, that's his agent, but his agent wouldn't say that if Walt Harris didn't tell him to say that. That's always been my contention. So he kind of really gave himself strike 2 there, if not strike 3, especially with the administration at the university, and that's the people you really have to keep happy.
Right. Yeah, it was an odd statement for his agent to make, and like you said, it was almost like, you're right, that was the moment where you just said, okay, this is done, this is over. And at the time, they were they were 2-2, but they had to take Furman to overtime. So they weren't, you're thinking it's a lost season anyway, and this is just going to end badly. And then, of course, things start to turn around.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those, and that's why, like I said, I like this team is because I don't know if the players played for Walt Harris or played in spite of Walt Harris, or maybe that's why, you can't just, Tyler Palko, for better or worse, is a leader. I don't know who in that locker room, somebody was able to rally the team around them, and the team just rallied in spite of all this. Like next week they go to Temple, and Temple always, for some reason back then, Temple always gave Pitt a game. And they played behind most of the game as usual, but they ended up rallying in the fourth quarter and winning 27-22. So they win a game they should win, and it was in Temple, and and they won in spite of all the negative comments that their coach had made. And so now the next week, I remember this. I went to this game, and this was at Heinz Field, and they played Boston College. And Boston College was ranked, and I think Boston College might even been picked to win the Big East that year. So I figured, Kiwanuka was their big defensive player. I just remember thinking, there's no way Pitt's going to beat this team. This Pitt team just isn't that good. But against all odds, like the big play early in that game was they ran a flea flicker, and nobody was open. So Tyler Palko runs the ball, and as the safety from Boston College comes up to tackle him, Tyler Palko literally runs him over and knocks the Boston College guy's helmet off. And it was just what you could see. If you see the bench, if you watch it on YouTube, like the bench just goes crazy.
I remember
that. And it's just like I said, like the team just all of a sudden, just you can see they're just rallying around each other, and in spite of all the bad stuff going on, they're kind of blocking it out. And another great play was there was a fourth down deep in Pitt's end. Boston College had the ball, and they threw a pass their wide receiver, and Darrelle Revis probably made like the most unreal tackle. Like I just remember him wrestling this guy at the 1 yard line to keep him out of the. And Revis was a freshman too. Mm-hmm. It was that was a lot of fun. And the game went to overtime. Pitt kicked the field goal, and then on the next Boston College possession, they were able to strip the running back, and they recovered the fumble to win the game. And it was a very improbable victory, and it was just a very satisfying one, especially because it was going to be embarrassing, like losing to Boston College on their way out the door to the ACC. So Pitt was that was a great feeling and a good win. Next week they went to Rutgers comes to town from New Jersey. They blew them out 17-44. I guess that's Rutgers. They stink, especially that year. And this is the game that probably cost them. Next week they went to Syracuse. I remember this one more than I don't remember the Rutgers one, but I remember this one. They lost in the Carrier Dome. That was back when they had won a few in the Carrier Dome, but Josh Cummings missed a late field goal in that. And if they would have won that game, they would have been on track to win the Big East outright. And that definitely would have helped their case. It wouldn't have looked as bad at the end of the year. The defense gave up 38 points, that Paul Pasqualoni option offense that they always had trouble with. I mean, they were like the Navy of the Big East. So, that was a tough one, but we always lose to Syracuse.
I hate
in
that
the dome.
Stadium.
Yeah,
they
don't have any plans on replacing it. Apparently,
we could do a whole podcast of just
bad stuff that's happened.
Terrible losses in not only just in football, in multiple sports, but especially in football in that building. And names like David Tyree and Troy Nunes and it just. So many just bad losses.
Well, they didn't win there for 30 years, from like Marino until like I think 2 years before this.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
They hadn't won in the Carrier Dome in football. So, but unfortunately, that was a tough one. If they would have won that, they definitely would have been better shape. It cost them an outright shot at the Big East Championship. So that was a tough loss. So the next week they go to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame is ranked 24th. It's probably one of the bigger games of their season outside of Boston College, and it's in Notre Dame. Pitt had lost to the Irish in their last 3 meetings. And this is the game that probably, I would say, solidified Tyler Palko as a quarterback. And you can argue between Palko and Flacco, but after this game, like he was definitely the unquestioned quarterback of the Pitt team, because he went into Notre Dame and threw 5 touchdowns and had an unbelievable great game. And then Josh Cummings made up for his misses in the game against Syracuse and hit a late field goal to win it. And of course, leading to the memorable post game quote that Tyler Palko was really proud of this effing team, which led to great T-shirts at the stadium the next home game. But that's Tyler Palko for you. Tom Hammond clutched his pearls and was got his fainting couch out, I guess.
That was live on NBC. NBC was already disgusted because that last drive, the thing that set up the Cummings field goal was, you might remember the name of the tight end. I don't. They threw a short pass to our tight end.
And he just broke a bunch of tackles.
Notre Dame just kept falling off of him, and he got like a 35-yard gain. That's what set up the game-winning field goal. So I mean, it's NBC. Notre Dame's their home team, so they're already disgusted that Pitt won, and then they stick a microphone in Palko's face and he drops an F-bomb. and what I remember about Tom Hammond said, we apologize for that, and what a shame that he had to mar such a good day with that disgusting moment. And as he was saying this, they were cutting the shots of Brady Quinn, who was the Notre Dame quarterback. Walking humbly off the field. Like there's a kid that won't swear on national TV, Brady Quinn. So it just it just made you more, like you said, more of a Tyler Palko fan at that point, because he not only went into Notre Dame and threw 5 touchdowns, but he just upset everybody, the whole network, everything.
Well, like I said, that was just this team that year. They just, no matter going into Notre Dame and winning. Notre Dame wasn't a bad team. They were a pretty decent team that year. I mean, they just really had no business winning that game, but they pulled it out. You gotta and did it their way. Well, the next game they played another ranked opponent. It was West Virginia at home, and it was the closely contested game. And Tyler Palko, another. You can see why now. Sometimes you forget. Why Tyler Palko was the quarterback. I mean, he was a pretty good quarterback in college. The pros, it didn't work out for him, but in college he really did, because in that drive he hurdled Pac-Man Jones and picked up a first down, and they were able to score the touchdown to seal the win for that. And this win was huge because it put them in the position to earn a share of the Big East title now.
That game was on Thanksgiving night.
I remember it was at night, and I remember him jumping over. I remember it was tightly contested too. It was a very closely.
It was very close. It was a tough game, and what I remember about it, because I was there, it was the coldest I've ever been in my life. It was so cold, and my cousin came with us. She ended up getting frostbite. It literally was.
Was it that? I don't remember.
Yeah, it was. Wow. It was freezing. I remember going.
There are other games I remember being cold. I remember there was another West Virginia game that was really cold where Larry Fitzgerald dropped a pass in the end zone, but that was 2001.
Yeah,
that was cold.
I
don't remember that game being that cold.
I remember going into the bathroom to try to warm up because I was just so cold. I remember standing in the middle of the Heinz Field restroom. But it was a great, like you said, it was a great win, and I normally don't like when a guy. Like Palko was that guy that John Madden or John Gruden, those kinds of guys were. He's a gamer. He's tough. Yeah. He's a gamer. But that's really what he was. He wasn't super talented per se, but he just was a gamer, and he would find ways to win.
He had a pretty accurate arm, and he could read a defense. He was smart enough to read a defense.
Yeah.
And in Walt Harris's offense, that complemented Walt Harris's offense very well.
Yes.
So and now this is kind of anecdotal, but Mark Ponko used to play safety way back then, and I've heard this from more than just Mark Ponko, but they had that Walt Harris is a complete jerk. I've heard that. I've heard that.
To his players, you mean?
Yeah. So like I said, maybe this team just rallied around Tyler Palko and each other and won in spite. Well, onward and upward, they went to Florida the next week. And that was South Florida, and they beat them in Tampa by 43-14. I remember Walt Harris looked ridiculous in a sombrero as they carried him off the field. But the fun part of that was it clinched like a 3-way tie for the Big East. And I remember watching, I think it was at a wedding, I was watching a game between Boston College and Syracuse. And Syracuse had the win to give Pitt the BCS ranking, and Syracuse went into Boston College and won. And I was like sitting there rooting for Syracuse for the first time ever in my life. So that was fun while it lasted. So 2004, the season's over, and BC beat Syracuse. Okay, Boston College had to beat Syracuse. There you go, I had it backwards. So Pitt has the higher standings in the BCS poll. Most people on the national level didn't consider Pitt worthy of a BCS selection, maybe because they wanted whatever team, like, I don't know what Ohio State was doing, but I'm sure that's what Herb Street was, wherever Ohio State was, I'm sure. It's just everybody has their own little teams they root for, and on a national level.
Well, a lot of people didn't really even like the fact that the Big East still had that BCS spot without Miami, without Virginia Tech, and soon to be without Boston College. I mean, the teams, the schools that they replaced them with, like you said, Connecticut, Cincinnati, South Florida, were not really historically big-time football schools. And so for someone to win the Big East, to the national audience, it was kind of like, okay.
Well, I think too the way they won, like if they would have beat Syracuse and won it outright,
yeah.
I don't think it would have been as bad.
Yeah, they did not. They weren't. A few years later, Cincinnati won the conference undefeated, and a lot of people still said, "Well, that's a weak conference," but at least they were like undefeated.
Undefeated, yeah.
Pitt had sort of muddled their way through the season and got hot at the end, and so, but nevertheless, here they are in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, they end up in. They had finally, Bob Smizek said in the beginning they need to play in a big bowl game. Well, Walt Harris accomplishes that. They finally get their New Year's Day bowl. It's the Fiesta Bowl. It's against Utah, who has Alex Smith at quarterback and Urban Meyer at coach. Yeah, so unfortunately for Pitt, Pitt probably wasn't just up to that challenge. It was a 35-7 game.
Yeah. And it wasn't that close.
Urban Meyer tried to run it up. I remember that, but they were at least good enough to not let him do. Although 30-some points isn't exactly close,
yeah.
But it's just, I think they had a successful season, and two, like before that, they had already canned Walt Harris. The administration had fired Walt, so they kind of had like no coach really, but then they let Walt Harris coach. It was a weird situation. They let Walt Harris coach the Fiesta Bowl, which is just odd. Maybe it's not as odd now because so many coaches change nowadays, but back then I remember thinking it was kind of weird.
He was a lame duck coach, but there's a lot of question over, was he fired? Did he resign? And I think, what was the public story at least?
Well, the public for consumption, the way they saved face was Harris resigned as their coach, and he got a job at Stanford and was hired by Bill Walsh, who was the athletic director at that time at Stanford. And Walsh said some negative things about Pitt, too, to, I think, help cover for Harris. So the university was able to say, oh, see, he left for another university, and then they went out and they actually had hired Dave Wannstedt. But they decided that, I guess, Walt Harris had earned this New Year's Day Bowl, and to kind of give him that as his going away severance pay thing, just to give one last chance at coaching and move on to Stanford. And it was kind of the end of the season. Like that last game was a shame. Really, the high point was probably beating Notre Dame. 5 touchdowns and beating West Virginia. That was really the high point of their season.
Agreed.
Like, this bowl game, even if they would have won it, it wouldn't have mattered. Like, Pitt was in that typical, like, kind of, like, when you're a middle-of-the-road school, like, if you lose to Utah, it's like, well, what are you doing losing to Utah? But then if you beat Utah, it's like, well, you should have beat them anyway. Right. So they were in a no-win situation. And they didn't win.
It was strange, though, after the season after Larry Fitzgerald's as a Heisman candidate, and they're playing Miami for the conference. And they were ranked number 8 in the country at one point. That's the year that's not the year that they're playing in the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, that it's this
the
year.
Next year when Fitzgerald's gone. They almost lose to Furman.
Yeah.
They're a team and a weak conference and a weak team, and that's the year that they are in the Fiesta Bowl. It was just really a crazy.
It was a crazy end of the year.
Yeah.
It was just weird that they were in. And I mean, the reason Walt Harris had to leave was he couldn't get big name recruits, and then putting those negative comments in the paper, it just poisoned the. He never had a great relationship with the local high school coaches, so that hurt his reputation too. He just wasn't able to recruit and keep people here like we'd said earlier, and it was a shame because he had his most successful season and he got fired pretty much. I mean, I still assume he just got fired. They just said, why don't you go find another job?
Yeah, I mean, or maybe he just wanted to find another job. Per his agent's comments, something had soured.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like Walt Harris, like, oh, please, I want to coach this team so badly. I mean, something had soured there, either on his side, their side, or both, probably both. And we'll never probably know the full story behind that.
Yeah, and kind of background, too, like, at that time, Ben Howland, who had rebuilt the basketball program, they offered him a ton of money. And remember, they had a big buyout. And UCLA, or I forget, one of the big shoe manufacturer guy came in and just was like, yeah, how much is that? And wrote like a check like it was nothing.
Yeah, but
they couldn't get Ben Howland to stay. And I think that kind of like, okay, we want somebody that wants to be here. It's kind of was the attitude when they hired somebody, and that's why they kind of went with Wannstedt.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because that was destined to happen. If you're going to hire, because look at the team they played in the Fiesta Bowl. Utah. What happened to Urban Meyer?
He went to Florida.
He goes to Florida, and that was happening all the time at schools with basketball and football. Mm-hmm. If you raised up a program from nothing and made it a national contender, then you got called up by the big leagues, so to speak. And so if you're going to hire like Ben Howland, UCLA is a obviously very rich tradition basketball school, and they poached him away. Harris, it wasn't quite the same thing. I mean, going to Stanford was not exactly like going to Michigan or Ohio State.
I think he decided he was out, and I think the administration wanted him out. Like, if you're looking for another job, now's the time to do it, kind of thing.
But to your point,
leave or you're fired.
But to your point, I think for long, I think that, like you said, the attitude was, okay, we don't want guys using this as a stepping stone. We want guys who want to be here. Mm-hmm. And when they hired Jamie Dixon and when they hired Dave Wannstedt, that's really that was really the mentality there. Like, these are guys that are going to stay. And honestly, even to this day, I feel like that continues. They're always trying to go after guys that they think are going to want to be here. It's not always a local guy like Dave, but it's they realize that they don't want to be the stepping stone program.
Well, it's tough, I think, too, when you're constantly turning over coaches, because coaches set such a precedent. I mean, it's like starting over every couple years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened after Wannstedt. They just kept stepping. Although, I mean, you could look at the University of Cincinnati. They've hired like 3 or 4 coaches and all had success. I don't know how they do it. I mean, they hired D'Antonio, then they hired Kelly, and now they have this Fickle. And they've had success under. Now, I don't know, you could say maybe they don't play a tough a schedule as other teams, but I mean, and they had Tommy Tuberville, I think, in there too. But Pitt doesn't want to do that. Yeah,
Pitt definitely did not have success doing that. Every time Pitt changed coaches, so when they changed to Wannstedt, it didn't go well at first, and then when they fired Wannstedt, they went through just years of chaos and 6 different coaches in 3 years or some ridiculous number like that. So typically, especially a school like Pitt, to change coaches, like you said, it does start everything over. The people they recruited are not the guys, are different. They recruited them to play a certain system. Now you're bringing another system. You have players transfer. It's all kinds of chaos. You definitely would rather have stability than not have stability at the coaching position.
And that was definitely their main criteria with Dave Wannstedt. They called him a Pitt man.
And he was. Yeah. He was a Pitt guy. He was a Pittsburgh guy through and through. And we talked about this in an earlier podcast when we talked about the 2007 West Virginia game. Dave would have stayed there till he died. He would have been like Paterno. He would have stayed there till he died if they would have let him. And that's that's what they were going for. And Walt Harris was not that guy.
No, Walt definitely was not staying there for the long term. Well, and you can see like Walt, the aftermath for all the, everybody seemed to take a hit. Like we said, when they switched from the pass-happy offense to a run-first offense, it took a couple years to sink in. They didn't go to a bowl game. Tyler Palko, after the Fiesta Bowl, Tyler Palko didn't play in another bowl game.
Right.
Which is hard to believe.
Right.
He was there, and he only played one.
He played 2 more seasons after that.
Yeah, and he only played in one bowl game.
Right.
Yeah. I guess the recruiting talent had dipped a little because he had lost. I remember the wide receivers were really bad. Like Joe Del Sardo, like I'm taller and faster than Joe Del Sardo, and that's a bad thing. That's probably not good. Greg Lee, I don't know what Greg Lee was thinking, but for some reason he thought he was an NFL wide receiver, and I'm no expert. I could just tell from watching him play that he was nowhere near an NFL wide receiver. Even if he would have stayed, he'd been lucky to have been an NFL wide receiver.
Yeah, Greg Lee's a tragic story because he left.
He listened.
Year.
Yeah, he listened to an agent or something.
Yeah, and I remember him being on the radio. I think it was like Stan Savran interviewing him, and he's like, "So where are you projecting yourself?" And he said the 3rd round of the NFL draft. And like there was a long pause for Stan. Like you could just tell he didn't want to like. It was too late. Like you can't say anything at that point, but you could tell he just was like, "Oh my gosh, you're kidding me." And Greg Lee didn't get drafted, and I don't think he ever played it down in professional football.
Yeah, he's serving milkshakes somewhere. I don't know. Okay, after that, Walt Harris, he went to Stanford, but he only lasted 2 years. And in his second season, they only won 1 game at Stanford. I think they lost to San Jose State at a home opener. Like Stanford built this beautiful new stadium, and they lost their home opener to like a Division I AA team. So, and Walt, he's never had another head coaching job after Stanford.
Did he coach after that? Was he like an assistant?
He's been assistant. He came back to Western Pennsylvania and like coached a little bit with like Cal U and stuff like that, but nothing major, no major programs or nothing. So I mean, once again, like I don't know what happened to Walt, but after that, he definitely fell off a cliff. Dave Weinstedt, his replacement, like we said, took 3 years for him to really get the program to where he wanted. And he found some success, but even Dave Weinstedt didn't go to a New Year's Day Bowl in his tenure at Pitt. Tyler Palko, he started 2 more years and never did play in another bowl game. Tyler Palko, despite that, ended his college career tied for 2nd in his school history with Cleveland Browns offensive coordinator Alex Van Pelt. He's gonna straighten out their Baker Mayfield. And he was 2nd in passing yardage to some guy named Dan Marino. I don't know who's that.
That's hard. That's hard to believe about Palko. Like you said, you don't think of Palko as like an all-time great Pitt quarterback, but he certainly has a lot of numbers.
Yeah, even with the switch to the Matt Cavanaugh offense, and he's one of the top 3 passes in Panther football history. I mean. Is that just because? And he only played 3 years, right? Yeah, he only played 3 years.
Right, because he was
redshirted. Yeah.
Yep.
So Joe Flacco got tired of sitting around and not playing, so he would transfer to a Division I AA school, the University of Delaware, and go on to become a first-round NFL draft pick for the Baltimore Ravens and winning a Super Bowl with the Baltimore Ravens.
And being a Super Bowl MVP and getting a very huge contract.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people don't think he's elite. I've always found that funny. I don't know. He's a big arm.
I mean,
he's tall.
Yeah, certainly we could debate whether or not Joe Flacco is elite. All I can say is that Joe Flacco did win a Super Bowl.
That's more than Tyler. Tyler Flacco had a horrendous NFL career.
Yeah, and you can't take that away from him. So
who had a worse NFL career, him or Nathan Peterman? Oh, there's a debate.
Yeah, Pitt quarterbacks have not. Joe Flacco is probably the only Pitt quarterback since Marino to have really found any kind of success in the NFL, and he played 3 downs at Pitt. So
that's the definition of having a cup of coffee here.
Yeah.
And the 2004 season, there's like so many in like Pitt football history. Like it's just so bittersweet because it's like so many great things happen. Like I said, like even the win against Boston College, the comeback against Furman, the beating Notre Dame in Notre Dame with Palco throwing 5 touchdowns, beating your big rival West Virginia, and making a New Year's Day bowl. If you would have said that before the season, I said, well, there's no way Walt Harris is gonna leave, But for whatever reason, Walt and the administration just could not see eye to eye, and that's a pretty common theme throughout Pitt athletic history for whatever reason. Well, that's one of the more interesting seasons of Pitt football. Probably would you say one of their more successful? I mean, I can't think of another seasons where they haven't been to New Year's Day Bowl.
Well, yeah.
It's their only New Year's Day Bowl since
the 80s, yeah. I mean, the Fiesta Bowl is definitely if you want to talk about like the furthest they ever got in terms of a bowl game, it was this season. It was a little bit of a fluke because the Big East had that. Was a
down year, yeah.
Because they were 8-4 that year. They had better years under Harris and Wanstead where they didn't get to go to the Fiesta Bowl. So it was a little bit of a fluke. However, it was what it was, and they made it there. And Harris, it was a weird tenure that he had. When he first came in, he was a hero because the program was just in absolute shambles. And he brought this offense, this exciting offense. He was able to recruit guys like Antonio Bryant and Larry Fitzgerald and, Lateef Grimm, like these exciting offensive, talented players. But then on the field, he just was never really able to get over whatever the hump was that he needed to get over. And, and then when he sort of finally did, then that was the end of Walt Harris. So it's kind of strange.
Yeah, it's just it's hard to wrap your head around that. It's such a college football story because like so many college football seasons probably have ended like this. How many teams have had like a season where there's teams that have gone undefeated and not won a national championship. So, I mean, that's just the way college football goes.
Well, college football doesn't really have a real champion. They have a subjective champion that people.
Especially back then, yeah.
Yeah, especially back then, there wasn't even a playoff. The playoff, you could even argue, is a little subjective. But yeah, back then it was just like, I guess this team's the best, so we'll vote for them, or we'll vote for 2 teams that are the best.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of look at some of these seasons as just okay. It's not as definitive as a pro sport where you either win a championship or you don't.
Well, I guess it's too like why college football is always more based on rivalry. Like beating your rival is such a big game.
And so the West Virginia, like you said, there were some really memorable moments. Beating West Virginia, beating Notre Dame, making it, playing in that Fiesta Bowl where, they were huge underdogs and you knew about, 10 minutes into the first quarter that it wasn't even going to be a game. It was still like, oh my gosh, we're watching Pitt play in the Fiesta Bowl. It was a big deal.
I think the first time they'd been in the Fiesta Bowl since like the early 80s too.
Right. I mean, they hadn't been in any kind of a big bowl game since Marino had graduated.
Yeah.
So, you're talking at that point, 20 years, and now 30 plus years later, that's still the case. That's still the biggest bowl game they've played in. So it was exciting. And
I mean, the next biggest game is the ACC championship game they played 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that team's kind of similar to this team like that.
Right.
They were just a plucky underdog like that I didn't even think was going to make a bowl game,
right.
Never mind, the ACC championship.
But I think like you said, it's so you remember that as a pretty cool season, but then it's like it's also the end of the era of Walt Harris being the coach. And who knows what would have happened if he would have stayed. I mean, things could have gone south just like they did for Wanstead, based on tougher competition in the Big East. Because some of those schools, started passing Pitt. Connecticut and Cincinnati, some of those new schools to the Big East really passed Pitt up.
But Cincinnati, like, I can never, like, how can Cincinnati have so much success and Pitt can't even can't figure it out?
And would that have happened with Harris like it did with Wanstead? We'll never really know the answer to that. But regardless, like you said, something happened where both parties just sort of agreed that they didn't want to be in business together anymore.
It was an ugly divorce.
Yeah.
And we were the kids that were traumatized.
All right, that's our episode. Hopefully everybody enjoyed that. Thank you everybody so much for supporting our show. If you want to connect with us on Facebook or if you want to text the show or connect with us on Twitter, all those links are in the show description. Please give us a rating on your podcast service if your podcast service allows that, and we will catch you next time.